My name is Samantha Williams, and I am 29 years old. As I drove back to my childhood home, my heart hammered like a drum. 5 years away. 5 years of proving myself on distant bases, earning every stripe on my uniform. Now I was returning, with my major insignia tucked safely in my flight suit. My family never took my service seriously. Little did they know that tomorrow, during family day on my base, everything would change. I pulled into the familiar gravel driveway, the same one I had ridden my bike down as a kid. The Montana sky was pale orange with sunset, and the porch, light flickered on as if welcoming me home. I took a deep breath, adjusted the baseball cap hiding my neatly pinned hair, and stepped out. Before I continue, I want to know where you're watching from. Drop your town in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe. If you've ever felt underestimated by those closest to you, this story will show you exactly how satisfying vindication can be. The front door creaked open before I could knock. My mother's voice called from the living room, but she stayed seated on the couch, eyes glued to a game show on the old television. "Samantha, is that you?" she asked without looking up. Her tone carried that same blend of surprise and subtle disappointment I'd felt all my life, like I'd somehow failed to live up to expectations simply by choosing the Army over a real career. I set my bag down quietly and wandered past her, my footsteps echoing on the faded linoleum floor. Everything looked exactly the same. The scuffed coffee table, the floral curtains fraying at the edges, the knickknacks on the shelves gathering. Dust. I followed the hallway to my old bedroom, pausing only when my mother called again. "Your brother's on his way home. He'll be here soon." She didn't bother to ask about me, only about Gregory. That did not surprise me. My brother's always been the golden child. He breezed through college on Dad's scholarships, landed a cushy job with a local contractor, and settled into a safe life that everyone praised. I slipped into my bedroom and closed the door with a soft click. The room was frozen in time. School trophies, high school yearbooks, and letters of acceptance to the state university still pressed into the corkboard above my bed. In the corner stood my old dress uniform from basic training, neatly pressed but clearly untouched. They had displayed my brother's graduation gown prominently in the living room last year. My uniform, buried in a drawer, forgotten. I opened my duffel bag and carefully laid my flight suit on the bed. The blue fabric was spotless. The silver. Bars of a major gleamed even under the dim light. At 29, I was one of the youngest majors in my wing, an honor earned the hard way. I'd flown missions across 3 continents, led a team of airmen in high-stakes operations, and earned commendations few imagined I could achieve. But none of that mattered to my family. To them, I was still the kid who refused to go to college and chose the Army fallback. I let my fingers trace the embroidered eagle on my chest, remembering the day I pinned on my first lieutenant bars. My mother had called to congratulate me, but spent more time talking about my brother's midterm grades. He might go to law school after this, she'd told me. I'd forced a smile and said, "That's great," before hanging up. In her mind, success equaled corporate titles and stable careers, not deployments and combat missions. Tonight, I would endure one more dinner of silent judgments. Tomorrow, I would step onto my base in uniform, and they would see exactly who I had become. I hung my major's bars on the closet rod, hiding them behind my old civilian clothes. My green flight suit came next, folded neatly to avoid wrinkles. I took one last look at the framed photo on my dresser. Me at age 18, standing in front of the recruiting office, beaming as I signed my enlistment papers. Then I turned off the lamp, letting darkness wrap around me like a cloak. The next morning dawned gray and cool. I woke before my alarm, anticipation fluttering in my chest. I dressed with automatic precision. Crisp polo shirt tucked into slacks, hair pinned up in regulation style, major insignia pinned just so on my collar. In the mirror, I saw someone new. Confidence in her blue eyes, purpose in her stance. No hint of the uncertain girl who once begged her parents for approval. I padded down the hallway. In the kitchen, the smell of pancakes lingered. My mother flipped a flapjack on the griddle without looking up. My father sat at the table, glancing occasionally at his phone. My brother's expensive suitcases lay unopened by the door, his plane having landed late last night. "You're dressed nice," Dad said, nodding without warmth. "Trying to look presentable for family day?" His voice was clipped. He still didn't know the half of it. "Yes, sir," I said softly, taking a seat. "Did you sleep well?" He shook his head. "Not really." I have a presentation for the council this afternoon, but we'll make it on time. Mother dropped a plate of scrambled eggs in front of me. She avoided my gaze as usual. Your brother's on his way down, she added, as if I had nothing to do with their conversation. He's excited to see the base. I forced a polite nod and began eating. The silence stretched as Dad and Mom discussed Gregory's accomplishments. His promotion to senior project analyst at a local engineering firm, his new engagement, his house. My career was never mentioned. When Gregory finally charged into the kitchen, he was all smiles and handshakes. He hugged Mom, kissed Dad's cheek, and barely glanced at me as he dropped his bags. Hey, Sam, he said, looking sharp. He jerked his chin toward my clothes. Did you give this outfit a polish? It wasn't a question. It was a sneer disguised as a compliment. I kept my expression neutral as I replied, Family day at the base. Dress code is smart casual. He smirked. Right. Well, let's roll. We piled into our cars, Dad in his sedan, Greg in his brand new SUV, and me in my truck, my helmet in the passenger seat. Dad followed my truck the 15 miles to the base entrance. As we passed through the checkpoint, uniformed guards snapped to attention, saluting me as I rolled down the window to show my ID. Dad's car was directed to the visitor parking lot. Greg's followed behind. Neither fully understood what was coming. Inside the base, the endless rows of hangars and barracks stretched out under a steel gray sky. We pulled into a parking area designated for Family Day, and I stepped out of my truck, the cool air brushing my cheeks. I was in my polished combat boots, crisp slacks, and light blue polo shirt. My hair tucked neatly under a cap. A few airmen in camouflage uniforms looked at me with respectful nods. One of them, Captain Jackson, snapped to attention and saluted. Morning, Major Williams, he said. Ma'am. My chest tightened, with pride as he let his hand fall to his side. Little did my family know, this captain was one of the officers I mentored last year. Dad and Greg, guided by civilian staff, rounded the corner just as Captain Jackson saluted. Greg's jaw dropped. Dad froze in mid-step. Mother followed behind, clutching her purse, confusion on her face. Sam, Dad said, using my civilian nickname as if he didn't recognize the uniformed major. I didn't know you were on duty today. Captain Jackson lowered his salute, eyes leaving mine and flicking toward Dad. Sir, Major Williams is scheduled to brief the colonel at 9 for Project Phoenix. If you need directions, the briefing room is down that hall. Dad opened his mouth as if to speak, but no sound came out. My mother stood 2 steps behind them both, her mouth hanging open. Gregory stared at me as if I had suddenly turned into someone else entirely. I offered a crisp nod and said, I'll see you all at the pavilion after the briefing. Then I turned and walked down the hall. The echo of my boots on the polished concrete sounded like a heartbeat. I paused only to place a firm hand on Captain Jackson's shoulder. Thank you, Captain, I said quietly. I appreciate it. He returned my nod with a quick salute and moved on to his duties. I found the briefing room and slipped inside, the door clicking shut behind me. Inside, a long table was surrounded by officers and civilians. Colonel Harris at the head, flanked by other squadron leaders and the base commander's representative. High-definition monitors displayed schematics of the new drone surveillance array we were integrating. This was Project Phoenix, a cutting-edge program to combine unmanned aerial reconnaissance with advanced data analytics. I had been tapped to lead the integration team based on my background in tactical support flights. Tomorrow, this program would undergo its first live trial. I took a seat near the center, placing a folder of reports neatly on the table. A young lieutenant gave me a thumbs up before he left. His respect was earned because I had stayed late last night, helping him troubleshoot sensor calibrations. I flipped open the folder and ran my eyes over the charts. Time to work. Outside, my family lingered near the entrance, surrounded by a group of civilian guests and base staff. Dad finally found his voice. She's a major? He asked, tone a mix of disbelief and something I couldn't name. How? When? Mom shuffled her feet. I thought she was still a flight lieutenant. Last I heard, she was stationed overseas. Greg's face twisted with conflicting emotion. Pride, shock, and something like envy. She never told us, he said, voice low. Never sent a single memo or a photo. Why would I heard myself say as I re-entered the hall, coming out of the briefing room. My uniform was immaculate. The major insignia glinted in the overhead light. My family took a collective step back. I've been on deployments, for the past 18 months. Communications aren't always possible. Not to mention, my work was classified. I crossed my arms. I didn't have to announce every promotion. I focused on the mission. Dad swallowed hard. "You're the lead on Project Phoenix?" he asked, voice unsteady. That's significant." I met his gaze evenly. "Yes, sir. The first live trial is tomorrow morning. I'm overseeing our UAV squadron and coordinating with ground intelligence." He glanced at the screens behind me through the glass partition. "I never imagined—" He trailed off. Mom simply stared, unsure whether to be proud or angry. Captain Jackson appeared at my side again. "Major, sorry to interrupt, but Colonel Harris is ready." I nodded and said, "Thank you, Captain." Then I turned to my family. "I'll see you at the pavilion in a couple of hours." Without waiting for a response, I walked past them, each step purposeful. The corridor lights flickered overhead, and officers at the far end saluted as I passed. The tension between us felt like a barrier I'd broken through. Inside the briefing room, Colonel Harris gave me an appreciative nod. "Major Williams, your team looks forward to the trial. Let's get started." The meeting commenced, and I presented a thorough analysis of the system's readiness, sensor integration, encryption protocols, flight patterns. When technical questions arose, everyone looked to me. I answered each one clearly, without hesitation. I outlined risk mitigations, fallback procedures, training regimens. I could feel my family watching through the glass panel, their heads turning each time my voice commanded attention. Colonel Harris leaned back and said, "Major, your expertise is exactly why I requested you for this. I've been hearing good things about your UAV work from higher headquarters." I nodded respectfully. "Thank you, sir." The room buzzed with activity as squadron leaders took notes and exchanged nods of approval. In the back, Lieutenant Ryan shot me a thumbs up. As the meeting wrapped up, Colonel Harris announced, "Major Williams, you will lead the live trial simulation tomorrow at 0800 hours. Ensure all flight teams are briefed." I stood and snapped a salute. "Yes, sir." The room fell silent, then everyone saluted in return. For the first time, I felt the full magnitude of what I had earned. Stepping out into the hallway, I found my family waiting. Dad's face had gone pale, Greg's eyes narrowed in disbelief. Mom looked as though she might faint. Father cleared his throat. "Samantha?" We had no idea. I took a deep breath. "I've been serving on active deployments. Dad, I didn't hide my promotions. I focused on duty." He ran a hand through his hair. "Your mother and we thought you were still just a junior officer. We never knew you were leading a critical program like this." Greg stepped forward, arms crossed. "So you came home without telling us that you were this?" His tone was accusatory but shaken. "I came home to visit the family. I didn't come here to prove anything. But tomorrow, you'll see me in action." I held his gaze. "I have to go run through final checks. Just be there and listen." Mom collapsed onto a bench, burying her face in her hands. "We should have asked. We should have tried to understand." I knelt and put a hand gently on her shoulder. "Mother, I tried to tell you, but when you compared my deployments to meaningless jobs, I stopped sharing. I wanted to spare you the pain of having to accept what you never valued." Her shoulders shook. "We were wrong, Samantha. All this time we were blind." I nodded, then turned and walked away toward the pavilion, where banners for Family Day fluttered in the warm breeze. We would talk later. Right now, I had a mission. That night, I went through my kit with military precision. My uniform hung ready in the closet, freshly laundered, pressed to perfection. I laid out my flight gloves, helmet, and boots in the exact order they would be needed tomorrow. Outside, the last remnants of daylight faded, and the base settled into quiet anticipation. I replayed tomorrow's schedule in my head. EO 630 briefing with the drone operators, EO 700 safety check, EO 730 final systems rehearsal, EO 800 live trial. My heartbeat steady and strong. Sleep came in fits. Dreams of past missions danced behind my eyelids, flying over desert landscapes, coordinating strikes, communicating with ground forces, and always that steady feeling of purpose. By the time first light crept through my window, I was wide awake. I dressed quickly in my flight suit, the fabric cool against my skin. The Major's insignia gleamed under the overhead LED lights. I checked my watch. 0545 hours. Time to get moving. I stepped outside into the crisp morning air, headlamp guiding me along the base roads. The sky was a deep blue, the hint of sunrise in the east. A few airmen jogged past, nodding respectfully as they recognized my rank. I greeted the operations officer at the squadron building, then headed to the briefing room. Inside, flight crews. From 3 UAV detachments waited, maps and tablets spread across tables. Colonel Harris stood at the front, flanked by intel and safety officers. "Major Williams," he began, voice firm. "Report." I stepped up and took a position in front of the screens. "Sir, all systems are green. The drone squadron is ready. For launch at 0800 hours. Encryption keys have been tested. Communications link verified. Weather is within operational limits. All operators have run through simulator drills. We anticipate a smooth trial." He nodded approvingly. "Proceed when ready." I turned to address the assembled team. "Listen up. This trial is crucial for integrating our new AI-driven analysis package. We'll run 3 sorties: recon, data relay, and final proof of concept. Safety is our priority. Keep eyes on frequency 44.2 and relay any anomalies immediately." Questions? Hands shot up. I answered each technical query, clarifying altitudes, flight corridors, and emergency return procedures. As I spoke, I could see the respect in their eyes. This was my domain. Each answer reinforced that I belonged here. At 0755, we filed out to the flight line. The desert sun had crested the horizon, painting everything gold. The drones sat on their launch pads, quiet and poised. Captain Jackson gave me a crisp salute. "Ready for launch, ma'am?" I returned the salute. "Execute?" At exactly 0800, the first drone lifted, rotors whirring like mechanical birds. The ground crew tracked its climb out, relays beaming telemetry to our control station. I monitored the feed, video, infrared, signal strength. The sky held no surprises. At 0820, the second drone launched, carrying the data relay pod. Link stability was at 99%. At 0840, the third drone took off, executing the final route. Mission parameters were met. Intel officers crunching data on their tablets gave thumbs-up signals. Colonel Harris exhaled, then turned to me and said, "Major Williams, impeccable. Execution." The AI integration worked flawlessly. We have high confidence in the system going forward. I allowed myself a small smile. "Thank you, sir. We'll begin debrief and analysis immediately." As drones returned to base and shut down, the crowd that had gathered for Family Day started to disperse toward the pavilion. I wiped sweat from my brow, adrenaline tapering. Off into satisfaction. Family Day banners fluttered near picnic tables laden with food. I could see Dad, Mom, and Greg standing just inside the assembly area, surrounded by curious neighbors and civilians. They spotted me and made their way over. I joined them, still wearing my flight suit, helmet in hand. My uniform was streaked with dust from the flight line, my scarf tucked under my chin. My father's eyes welled with pride. "Samantha," he said, voice thick, You did it." He swallowed. "I'm so sorry we doubted you." I placed a hand on his arm. "It's okay, Dad. You're here now." Mom stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "I had no idea what you were doing out there. I never asked because I thought you'd tell me if it mattered." I nodded. "It always mattered. To me. I just couldn't get you to listen." She reached for my hand and squeezed it. "I promise I'll listen from now on." Greg, shifting uncomfortably, finally smiled. "Samantha, I watched the feed. I saw that last pattern recognition loop. And when you directed Jackson to adjust the grid, nobody else caught that glitch except you." I raised an eyebrow. "You were paying attention?" He nodded. "Yeah, I'm proud of you." His voice cracked slightly. It was the first genuine thing he'd said to me in years. The pavilion's PA system crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, please gather around for the project debrief." Colonel Harris approached on stage, microphone in hand. He motioned to me. "Major Williams will give a short briefing." I stepped up, my heart steady. The sun warmed. My face and family members beamed at me from the front row. "Thank you, Colonel," I said, voice carrying across the hush of the crowd. "Project Phoenix is now a validated system. Today's trial confirmed sensor reliability at 200 kilometers, data relay latency under half a second, and seamless AI integration for real-time target tracking. Next steps will involve expanded coverage and deeper encryption protocols. Our unit will begin Phase 2 next month. Thank you to all who supported this effort and to my team for flawless execution." I nodded to Colonel Harris, who gave me a respectful nod back. The crowd erupted in applause. Civilians patted me on the back. My family looked stunned but proud. Dad mouthed, "Well done," to me. Mom dabbed at her eyes. Greg took a small step forward, then hesitated before enveloping me in a tight hug. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I was wrong." I hugged him back and said, "Thank you." It felt like the culmination of every sacrifice I had made. That evening we gathered at my house, my home on base, for dinner. It was a modest event. Grilled chicken, baked potatoes, salad. My parents and Greg sat at the picnic table on the patio. I joined them after stowing my flight suit. I wore civilian clothes now, jeans and a hoodie, trying to relax into this new dynamic. The sky was a canvas of purples and stars. Dad cleared his throat. "Samantha, you have no idea how proud I am. I've been telling your mother all day that I was wrong to push you toward college in the first place." He paused, looking at both of us. I didn't understand the service until today. Mom reached across and squeezed his hand. "I know I compared you to your brother for years. I thought it was helping, but it was only hurting you." She smiled at me. "I want to understand your world. Teach me." Greg leaned forward. "When you flew those drones today, I realized I was in the shallow end of the pool. You're playing at a whole different level." I chuckled. "I didn't mean to show you up." He shook his head. "You weren't showing off. You were just doing your job." I met his gaze. "They're more than drones. They save lives," my mother asked quietly. "Can you tell us about one of those missions?" "Just a little. Nothing classified." I thought of that night over the desert, coordinating a rescue for stranded soldiers under fire. I described it in broad strokes. The tension of guiding teams, the moment the evac hovered overhead, the relief when everyone was safe. Dad and Greg listened, eyes wide. Mom dabbed at her cheeks again. "I never knew how serious it was," she said. "I never realized." We finished dinner, and as the plates cleared, I realized how far we had come in a single day. The family that dismissed me had finally seen me, not just as Samantha, the baby sister, but as Major Samantha Williams, mission leader, protector, innovator. The validation I once craved no longer defined me, but their newfound respect was healing. Chet Kshawiks. Months later, I hosted them again for Thanksgiving in my on-base home. The house was warm, decorated with strings of lights and a modest tree. Dad carried a framed photo from today's ceremony, me shaking hands with Colonel Harris, and the words, "Major Samantha Williams, Project Phoenix Lead." He placed it on the mantel. Mom brought homemade pumpkin pie. Greg arrived with a turkey he'd helped carve. As we sat down at the table lined with family photos and trophies, Dad raised his glass. "To Samantha," he said, voice rich with pride. "You have shown us that following your own path can lead to extraordinary places. Thank you for being yourself." We echoed his toast, glasses raised. I felt a calm satisfaction settle over me. My choices had always been valid. The fact that my family finally understood was just the icing on the cake. Later, as we lounged in the living room, Dad examined my flight patches on display. Operation Phoenix, Operation Desert Shield, Operation Coastal Guardian. He asked questions with genuine curiosity, and I answered proudly. Mom laughed when I described base life, weekend drills, formation marches, the constant drone of aircraft overhead. Greg teased me about my coffee-addicted crew chief, but smiled warmly. I realized that the victory was never about defeating their doubts. It was about remaining true to myself. That is what led me here. If you've ever faced doubt from the people you love, remember, your path is valid even if they can't see it at first. So, what about you? Have you ever been underestimated by those closest to you? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of resilience and triumph. And remember, sometimes the best validation comes when someone, maybe even your captain, salutes you and says, "Ma'am."